Before we get into today's episode, listeners, I just want to thank our sponsors. Without our sponsors, we couldn't bring you this podcast. So today we have two sponsors, the first of which is Restaurant.com. With Restaurant.com, you can save at thousands of restaurants across the country with just a few clicks. Their dining deals range from $5 to $100. They never expire, and they cost a fraction of the face value. Dinner has never been easier with Restaurant.com, used for dine-in, takeout, or delivery. Restaurant.com is offering our listeners 50% off their next purchase by going to www.restaurant.com/podcast. That's www.restaurant.com/podcast for 50% off your next purchase. Restaurant.com, the best deal every meal. And our second sponsor for this episode is Nightcap, the drink spiking prevention scrunchie. Do you ever feel uncomfortable at a bar with your drink exposed? Are you someone who covers their drink with their hand or their napkin? Now you don't have to. Nightcap is a fun solution to a serious problem. It can be worn as a wristband or a hair tie and taken out to cover up your drink at any time. According to alcohol.org, 56% of women have reported having their drink spiked at some point. It's time to take action with Nightcap. With the holidays coming up, giving Nightcap to a friend or a loved one is the perfect way to show that you care about their safety. Go to nightcapit.com, that's NIGHTCAPIT.com, and enter the code BARTALK, all capital letters with a space in between bar and talk, for 20% off your order, valid until November 31st. And now, let's get into the podcast. All right, welcome back, Inebri-arts. This is Andy, and we have with us today Iain Morris, who is a writer for TV. Is that the best way to describe what you do?
Yeah, I think so. I've done a bit of directing and I've made a couple of films, but yeah, basically mostly TV of late, yeah.
So I actually interviewed your wife not too long ago, and she told me that you were a writer for TV, and I kind of asked what I might know, like what you have done. She didn't mention the Inbetweeners, and you're like one of the creators. Is that accurate?
That is accurate. Yeah, that's exactly who I am. I'm one of the two guys that created it. Yeah.
So that's kind of that was a huge show, kind of over in the BBC area. You know, over here in the States, I don't think it's quite as well known.
No, that's probably why she didn't mention it. I think she's probably got a bit like me. It's one of those things where you kind of mention it and people have a bit of a blank stare. But yeah, in the UK, I suppose it's kind of a big deal. It's always nice to have to tell people that you're a big deal. That's always worked. It's always a good sign.
Yeah,
I'm actually quite a big deal. It turns out, you've never heard of me.
Just not here. Yeah.
Not here. Not anywhere useful. But no, yeah, it was one of those things. I think we did 3 seasons and then 2 feature films in the UK, and just kind of struck a chord with people, really. So yeah, but she's the reason I live in America, rather than I'm carried around on a sedan chair from town to town in the UK. So that's I have to walk the streets with relative anonymity, rather than being lauded, as of course I am.
Well, their TV is pretty different over there. Like 3 seasons is pretty much all you ever get, right? It's not like here where, you know, The Simpsons are on for 90% of my life.
Well, we made 18 episodes, and that took us 3 years. So it gives you an idea of the slight difference. And each episode is only 23 and a half minutes or something. So yeah, it's a different way of doing it. I wouldn't say it was better or worse. I'd say it's definitely different. I wish now that we've made many more episodes of the Inbetweeners, because I think we could have done, but it was just, we were like, every episode, every series was basically a year of our lives, so we kind of like, something else. But,
and I mean, here in the U.S., everyone kind of strives for that like 100th episode, so they can do syndication. Is there not syndication in the UK like we have here?
No, that's it. So the money is the main reason we have shorter runs in the UK. So you can't afford a writer's room. That's why things are much more individual, because people tend to write it themselves. Because really, writing a script in the UK doesn't pay. I think the first script I wrote over here, I got paid. I think me and Dave got paid literally 10 times as much as we got paid for the Inbetweeners scripts.
Oh wow!
So it kind of gives you an idea of the economics involved, and so you can't really. We talked about trying to group write the Inbetweeners when we started it, but it doesn't work to split the money over there. So yeah, because there's no syndication, smaller market, just a different way of doing things. You haven't had the team stuff, but interestingly, recently, particularly dramas and stuff, there's been more team writing and stuff because of Netflix and Amazon and stuff being sold internationally. Means there's more of a lot of shows partners up earlier. So there's there's more money in the UK than there used to be. Certainly when we started, we were kind of pretty broke. I think I was sleeping on friends' floors when we started the Inbetweeners.
So where do you start on a script? Do you start, because I think I'm gonna probably screw this up, but I think it was Gary Marshall said he had two kind of different writing styles. I think he said for I Love Lucy he would start with the final scene and kind of work backwards, and then for the Dick Van Dyke Show he would start with the opening idea and then kind of work forwards. Do you have a specific style for each show, or do you just currently have one way of doing things?
I don't really. I wish I had the work back from the end, because I think anything I've done that I've thought is really successful, it always has a great ending, and then you can just you're kind of reverse engineering your way towards that ending. And I think that about films and stuff as well. When I'm writing them, is I'm like, I'm doing something at the moment. I'm writing, and I know the ending's good, so I'm like, all I've got to do is try and get to that ending.
Yeah.
And then I remember actually when we were doing, I think it was the Inbetweeners, the first Inbetweeners film, we had a great ending for, and we knew that. Well, we got that. So it's just about getting us to that point. We went through, 20 drafts of the script. The second one, I don't think we had such a great ending for. We had a good ending, but it was harder to get to. So and it went on a bit too long, so we didn't quite stick the landing. But no, I tend to just try and write from character first. Think about who the people are, how they're interacting, and then try and build a world. We know the world a bit, and then try and sort of fill it in a bit from there, I guess.
Yeah.
I used to have I was really good at having ideas in the shower, to the point where it became like obsessive when we were doing the Inbetweeners. I would just make sure I had a 10-minute shower every morning, no matter what time of day it was or where I was, just so that I could try and think. And that was my thinking time, was the shower. But I've stopped doing that recently, so I might have to go back to trying to get longer in the shower.
I think all my best ideas come in the shower. I don't know what it is. It's very, I don't know. It just kind of shuts the rest of the world out and kind of lets your brain do whatever.
Yeah, it's good. I'm a big fan of that.
Yeah.
I've just remembered that I used to do it a lot as well, actually, talking about it, so I must try and do it again.
And you've also written on shows like Flight of the Conchords and What We Do in the Shadows. Is it easier to write with other people's characters, or do you prefer to write with your own?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was easier because, so interestingly, the first script we wrote for Flight of the Conchords, Damon and I, who wrote the Inbetweeners together, wrote before we'd actually had any of the Inbetweeners on TV. We knew Brett and Jermaine very well, and James Bobin, who was the showrunner, was actually best man at my wedding with Damon Beasley, who I wrote the Inbetweeners with. But we knew them really well, but obviously HBO needed to be convinced because we hadn't written anything. So they used the pilot script we've written of the Inbetweeners. And then the first draft we wrote for Brett and Jermaine wasn't very good. And just didn't work. It was a kind of weird, it was like a bottle episode, really. They was kind of stuck on a roof. And I think they felt it couldn't work. So we ended up totally abandoning that script and rewriting it. And I think when we rewrote, we were much less cautious about, or worried about the script, because you kind of know when you're writing on other shows like that, you know that people are going to rewrite it or redo bits in when they're on set. So the second time we wrote for Flight of the Conchords, we wrote the Unnatural Love episode, which is the Australian girlfriend that Jermaine gets. And we really just, I've still got the notes now. I remember waking up in the middle of the night thinking I've got a joke for this and just writing it down. But I think we wrote that script in about a week, which is pretty quick for us. And because it felt like we knew their voices, but we had a bit more freedom. So I think, which is going back to the question, really, which is that I think it was a bit quite freeing, and I certainly found that writing on What We Do in the Shadows was the first, certainly in the writer's room. I was only there for a week, but the first, I was like, here's some ideas, here's some jokes, here's some thoughts, and I don't really mind if you don't like them, because it's not me that's, I haven't got my name above it. It's not, I'm here to service your vision rather than, trying to create my own thing from the dust, really. So it was really enjoyable. Everyone was very, very nice. And then similarly, the episode that I wrote, season 1 of What We Do in the Shadows, was another thing of me just kind of feeling relatively unshackled by, I suppose, pressure, which made it better.
So you kind of find it less pressure where, if it's your thing, like it all, like the buck stops with you. Like you have to produce, where working on someone else's thing, it's like, well, if you don't like what I have, there's other people in the room, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. I found it quite freeing both sides. I loved it. I love working with other people anyway. That's sort of why I got into comedy, really, is I like funny people, and I've never considered myself, and I don't think I ever have been, actually, the funniest person in any room. And so it's great to be in a room with other funny people, and I think that is kind of my, I always work hard on scripts and stuff like that and put a lot into them, but when you're writing for somebody else's characters, it's not quite as, I've not found it quite as pressured.
Yeah. I mean, I found when I'm working on a project with other people that it's less, like, it's not fun to hang out by yourself all the time. When you're working with other people, it feels less work-like, and,
Yeah, it's kind of writing on your own, I think, is fundamentally quite miserable. And Damon and I write together. We wrote together a lot last year for the new sitcom we were doing, and that was, we can draw misery out of each other, but fundamentally we enjoy the misery. You can make a joke about having not written a page in 2 days, or how much you're struggling with it when you're sitting opposite each other, but when it's just you, it feels less funny, really. So I think it's, I think comedy particularly is great to work with other people.
And so when you're writing with him, are you physically in the same room, or do you guys kind of like write separately and then bring it together? Or? No,
we do write in the same room, really. Yeah, we've tried doing it, Zoom and things like that. But actually, I think because when we started Inbetweeners, we went away. Actually, we went away to a house, and we decided to sort of get a pilot written in a week. So we borrowed a friend's parents, had a house somewhere quite isolated in the UK, and we just went there and we're like, right, we're going to write this thing in a week. We're going to spend a day talking about the characters, then we're going to spend a day talking about situations, then we're going to type it up in 3 days. And we did a bit of that in different rooms, and then we reread it every night. But I think because of that, we felt like, and we still do feel like, being in the same, there's no kind of substitute really for being in the same room. Just sort of talking it through, really, and even when it's the typing stage, it feels a bit like being in the same room gives you a chance to, you can't really muck around. You got to sort of like, got to do it because there's someone sitting there relying on you, even if it's your oldest friend. It's still like, well, come on, you got to do something. So so the point was that when we did the Inbetweeners and when we write now, we kind of make it like a working day. So it's kind of perspiration rather than inspiration, which is that we'll start at 10. We'll have a break at 1 for lunch. Then we'll be back on at 2, and we'll go from 2 till 6. It's just like the early days, not when it's getting very pressured. But the idea of those hours is to sit there and not surf the internet, and not just to sit in front of the laptop and just think, okay, I'm in this place now. I'm with this person, and we're going to do some work. And if it we do a lot of redrafting. So even if the first draft is terrible, I think we kind of feel like at least you've got something you can change rather than something that's wonderful and perfect but is still in your head.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that's ringing true. I've been at home for the better part of 4 months now because of the way things are, and I'm trying now to get back in the swing of things and trying to work from home. And I was saying to someone today, it's like I can have one thing to do and I don't seem to have the time to do it. And
yeah,
do you think you have a better time like leaving your home? Do you think you'd be able to work from home?
I'm not great at working from home, and I've had to work from home for the past few months. And but I'm sort of like, as I get older, I'm a little kinder, almost, I mean, I don't know, sure the quality of the work reflects it, but I'm kinder on myself in terms of my hours. So I'm like, if I can do 3 or 4 solid good hours, no internet surfing, get everything turned off, focus in a day, I'm like, that's not bad. That's quite a good, and I tend to set myself. So I'm doing a draft of a script at the moment. I'm setting myself pages per day, and again, it doesn't matter really if they're good or bad. They're just like, they're going to get done at this stage, and if they get done, then I'm going to go back and rewrite it 20 times anyway. So at this stage, it's like just get that done.
Yeah.
Which is, again, I quite like traveling to an office, but I did have an office in LA on my own, and I found it worse than working at home, to be honest. I thought, God, I'm traveling somewhere to be a bit lonely, and I've got to buy like a weird lunch that I don't particularly like, rather than at least I can go to my own fridge and make a ham sandwich or something.
Yeah. And you have a newborn, right? Am I remember that correctly?
She is 1 next month, actually.
Oh, so it's still fairly small.
Small. She's actually a giant.
Does having kids have an effect on your writing at all? Does it change your perspective on things, or?
It hasn't yet. A friend of mine's had kids longer than I have, and he said that he realised after his son was born, his writing changed quite fundamentally. And he writes kind of like action films and stuff. And he said that it kind of everything became about protection. Every sort of central character, every story was about protecting people, and it was really interesting talking to him about that. But no, so far it hasn't really. I mean, having said that, I'm working on something at the moment that's about parenthood, and it suddenly is quite useful. You're like, oh, actually, wait a minute, I know what that's like. I've got a joke for that.
Yeah. Or like, that funny situation that happened, you can kind of work it in, and that kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, it's a new source of material, that's for sure. But also, knocks, particularly at the moment, it knocks hours out of your day. 'Cause you're like, oh God, I've got to deal with this and do that and look after this existing human being who I love.
It does get easier. Like they get more self-reliant.
Yeah. Oh, good.
Not entirely, but they get better.
No. I'm pretty emotionally attached to them. I find it quite hard. I have to put headphones in, really, because otherwise I'm just sort of constantly listening out, wondering, are they okay? Is everyone okay? Is everyone all right?
Why is it so quiet? That was always the alarming. Yeah.
Quiet. My son's 4, and when he goes quiet, because he's never quiet, that's when you know something really bad's happening.
Yeah. So you said your friends writes action movies. Have you ever thought about doing things other than comedy?
Yes, I have really. I mean, again, I kind of like taking some weird career paths over the years. But yeah, a few years ago, I think, the Inbetweeners has only been a blessing. So it's hard to describe it as a curse. But I think a few years ago, I had a film deal in the UK, and I wrote a kind of comedy drama, actually, TV show, and everyone liked it, but no one really wanted to make it, I think, because they wanted me to make more comedy. So I ended up making more comedy. And similarly, I had a sort of much more dramatic film idea. And I think if I'd stuck my heels in a bit, I'd have been allowed to do, people would have wanted me to do both of those things eventually.
Yeah.
But instead, I was a bit like, oh, well, if you don't like it, fine, I'll just go back and do some more broad comedy, which is what you like. So I think I would like to. I'm slightly worried that I might have gone down a path too far now, that no one's going to take me seriously. But I would also say, whilst like all comedians and comedy writers, I'm terribly serious. I actually think if you can write a comedy that makes people laugh, it's quite hard. And I'm quite proud of, what I've done from time to time.
I think it's absolutely the hardest art form to work in. I know a lot of people who have actually kind of launched comics. There was maybe 15 years ago, where I was around a lot of people who were trying to launch their own comics, and everyone was writing a comedy. And it's like, if you're lucky, the first one was funny, but it was either inside jokes, or was like a one joke comic, and it's just like it's so hard to write something that appeals. You're never going to appeal to everybody, but to appeal to a large audience.
Yeah, and also I think the other thing about, I mean, I'm a big comic book fan, and I certainly was years ago, and it's really hard to be, and I read a lot of books, I read an enormous amount of books. It's really hard to be laugh out loud funny in the written word. I think it's really difficult. Like, I think at least with, TV and film, you're watching clowns say funny word, whereas the written word is really, again, I'm reading one of my favourite sort of comedy memoirs at the moment. It's called Unreliable Memoirs by a guy called Clive James, who died, I think, this year. Who's a brilliant Australian broadcaster. And it's really funny. It's so funny. I'll tell you about it, but I think I've laughed out loud, once, twice, because I can hear him saying it.
Right.
And to see it sort of flat. And that was the interesting thing. When we started when we wrote our first ever comedy script, we were quite, keen to put jokes in the stage directions, to put jokes in every description of every character, because we're like, this just has to, this document isn't a TV show. This document is a sales document of how funny we can be.
Right.
That was very much about, let's make sure that when people finish this, all they remember is that was funny. Mm-hmm. And then they want to work with us on that basis, rather than, oh, well, the dialogue was great, but actually was a bit boring, or just like, it doesn't. I don't think people, when they've read a script for the first time, differentiate too much. They're just like, the totality of that half an hour I've just spent was funny. So yeah, it's kind of a cheat, but I think it's a worthwhile cheat, is to make sure that your scripts have jokes throughout them.
So now that you have had that experience, that people know who you are, do you find that you are leaving more of those nuances maybe up to the actors and directors to kind of find, like, the funny looks or funny acts, or stumbling here or whatever?
Yeah, we wouldn't even, I'd never really write in acting directions. I'd never be like, here's sad here, or here's, or this, he plays it like, this. I'd always try and avoid that. But no, I still try and write in character descriptions, because again, I read quite a lot of friends' scripts and stuff like that, and I always appreciate when I'm just enjoying the ride, and because whatever people say, it's hard to, it's a written document. You're reading something, a script. You're not watching it on TV. You've got to, right. So it's got to exist in that media. It's got to feel like it's a worthwhile read. So I try and make them as interesting as I possibly can. I don't know if I always succeed.
And you've worked with actually one of my favorite comics.
Huh.
You've worked with Jimmy Carr.
I've worked with Jimmy Carr, yeah. Jimmy Carr did a reading at our wedding. I consider him a close friend. Yeah.
Hysterically funny.
No, great. I'll tell him that. He'll take it like he takes all the compliments, which is he'll go, yes, I am. Correct.
That's the only way that you could ever hope that he would take that.
Yeah. No, he's a very good friend. I directed his first Edinburgh show, his first hour-long stand-up thing. We worked together for a year on that. God, a long time ago now. And that was fantastic.
So that's kind of what I was getting at. Like, I saw that you directed his stand-up specials. How do you direct a stand-up special? Like,
well, that was kind of it. It was about, it was essentially a theatrical direction. So it was like, okay, we've got 50 minutes for this Edinburgh show. He's got his jokes. I didn't really write any jokes for him, but I would look at it and I'd be like, okay, well, actually, I think if you tweak that joke there, that might hit a bit harder. And I think if you tweak that joke there a bit harder, then it'd be like, okay, let's look at the totality of what the theatrical experience is for the next 50 minutes. It's okay, great. So that show, we had a thing where, in Edinburgh, people file in to the seats.
Yeah.
And then you wait, and then the act comes on, and it always gets quite hot, and it's a bit difficult. And also, something we tried was that Jimmy at the time was doing lots of one-liners. He still does. He's got them reverted to that. It's very successful. But I was like, I think one-liners are great, but I think when you get going with an audience, or you can get a rolling laugh that gets people genuinely weeping, laughing. Whereas I think with a sort of online, you tend to get a peak and a trough, and a peak and a trough, and a peak and a trough, rather than like a big rolling, increasing laugh. So, we talked about him standing there as the audience came in and chatting to them, because I knew it made it uncomfortable. He didn't like doing that. But doing that in some of the rehearsal, we did a show every week, really, or he did a show every week to practice. And actually, that was some of the best stuff. It was kind of amazing. People were surprised by it. It was interesting. So that was an idea. Then again, a bit later in the 50 minutes, he did some stuff with the audience because he didn't like doing audience stuff. So again, we tried it out rehearsing. I was like,
that's so funny because I think of him as a person who interacts with the audience a lot, where he almost actually.
Well, see what happened to that? Yeah. I mean, he's amazing, and he's absolutely brilliant at it. And again, I think that was the thing, is we were like, oh, actually, you know what? He works really hard. He worked really hard at it. But when he started that year, I think I was still working. God, it must have been 19 years ago. I was still working at a network in the UK. I was a executive at a network, and he said, "Look, I want to be a TV presenter. I want to present TV shows, and I want to be like Jonathan Ross, who's a sort of chat show host."
Oh yeah. He does. Or he did fool us with Penn and Teller for a while.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So he's like, Jimmy's like, I want to be a TV presenter. And then over that year that he worked, he did like 300 gigs, I think, before the Edinburgh show. That first year, he just fell in love with stand-up. He just became like, it was like, this is what I want to do. And he didn't want to do the TV. And the TV stuff came along because he got really good at that. And I think it was the same with the audience stuff. Was that he was like, no, I'm not good at talking to audiences. And it was just like, I bet you will be. Let's try it. Why don't we try something? And before you know it, we've got somebody who's just ducked to water, like a total natural at it. So really that was kind of what the directing was about looking at somebody's, and I'd done it a bit before with Ricky Gervais. And it was one of those things where it's like looking at their hour and going, I mean, Gervais less so, but just looking at the hour and going, well, what about this, or what about this, or what's, as an audience member, what's my experience going to be of this 50 minutes? That was kind of what that's the state of the direction, I guess.
Yeah. So Jimmy's success is because of you. That's what I'm hearing.
100%.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, see, honestly, it's just because he works incredibly hard. He's incredibly funny. I mean, I think that is the thing, is that I've always, I think about not being the funniest person in the room. I think I was quite a bad stand-up myself, and I was quite lazy, but I knew what was funny. And I think that's the key thing, is going, okay, well, look, you're funnier than me. But what about this, or what about that? And if people say no, then you're like, yeah, fine, great. But if they take to it a bit and it works, then it's very rewarding to see people, take your ideas into action, and you don't have to do it yourself.
So did you do stand-up as well?
Very early on, yeah, I did some open mics and I got paid for a few gigs and stuff. But I was very young. I was like 19, 20, 21 when I did it. I didn't really have any material. I was too lazy to write any more material. I compared a club that a friend of mine ran for a few years, and I quite enjoyed that in my sort of mid-20s. But I didn't. I kind of. It's one of those things where I think if I'd worked really hard at it and devoted my life to it, I think I could have been an averagely good stand-up. And even at the time, 20 odd years ago,
yeah,
I remember thinking, I'm not sure the world needs another averagely good white male heterosexual stand-up. I was like, probably. It's a pretty crowded field. I'm not sure my perspective on life is going to be it's really worth it for me or worth it for the audience, So I stopped.
And you said you're working on a movie. Is that the football movie that you're working on?
No, it's not actually. I've had the rights to a book for a few years, and I'm trying to turn this book into a film, which is much harder than I do. I've done it. I've tried to do it a couple of times before, and it's always been a failure. So I'd forgotten that when I got the rights to this book. So now I'm remembering that it's really hard to turn a book you love into a film, because you love the book too much, and you want to use huge chunks of it, and you want it to be as honest to it as you possibly can. But actually, so the film with Taika, that's Taika's, I guess, editing that, doing what he does with it. So,
is that already shot? Is that?
Yeah, you shot it in November, December last year.
Oh wow, okay. So you said you're transforming a book into a script. Now, is it harder because, like, I always think of like Harry Potter, where they have the Quidditch scene, which is this huge set piece in the movie and goes on for like 20 minutes, it feels like.
Yeah.
In the book, it's like 2 pages. So do you find it hard to kind of figure out which pieces are going to be cinematic and which, might have to be kind of scrapped, basically, because it doesn't translate to film?
Yeah, I think it's partly that. I think it's partly that, you've got to think to yourself, what am I watching here? Against what do I love reading? And also, I think you've got to, I'm trying to think about what the story is really and what the emotion is. And the books, you can get into the characters' heads much more easily because you're with them for a longer period of time, really. So how do you make people feel in a film the same way about those characters in, an hour and a half, 2 hours that they do in the 10 or 12 hours they spent reading a book? So that's a change. Funny enough, I've been rewatching the Harry Potters. Actually, I've just finished the first half of the 5 Deathly Hallows. But I was watching them.
It's funny. I've only ever seen those last 2 movies once, and I've never felt the need to kind of go back and rewatch them.
Well, I read all the books because I used to do lots of pub quizzes in London, and I knew that they'd come up. So I read the first 3 books when they came out, and then after that, I was catching up with the books as they came out. I mean, I wasn't queuing outside at midnight to wait for them. So then I watched the first film. And after the first film, I was like, I probably don't need to. So I'm kind of catching up myself on the films. It's the first time I've seen these films. But they've done a really good job because, again, I think the last book is, the last book could be called Harry Potter Hides in a Tent While All the Loose Ends Are Tied Up.
Yeah, I suppose so.
And then a really good battle. So actually, the fact they kind of could put that on its feet and there was a bit of excitement about him being in a tent and he wasn't in a tent too long, I think is pretty impressive, really. And particularly the kind of weight of that. Like, some books you can just adapt and because no one's really read them or no one cares. It was just like, yeah, fine. Whereas some books that are beloved like that, everyone's waiting for, they need every single bit that they love from the book. Otherwise it's not the proper sort of film, really. So
yeah, and it's funny when people read something, they have an impression in their head and then they see it on film and it's not how they had it in their head. And I remember,
I've got there's a couple of books that have been adapted that I love that I won't watch the film of because it will ruin it for me.
Which ones?
You know what? I can't remember. I know that the main one is The End of the Affair by Graham Greene. So I won't watch that film. And I can't remember what the other ones were. There's a couple of other ones of books that I love. I just feel like, no, I'm not going to do it.
I just remember a friend of mine got really upset. I think he saw the TV version of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Oh yeah.
And in the book, it describes how the digital book is inside a plastic container, and he always had it in his head visioned as like a piece of Tupperware. And so in the movie, the show, it's like a 2-second throwaway where they take the book out, and he's like, "It wasn't a piece of Tupperware. I can't watch it."
Yeah, no, it's hard. I mean, again, I read those books after I'd seen the TV series, which again, I watched that last year as well, weirdly. But I remember the other one. The other one is Chesil Beach. On Chesil Beach, they made a film of that years ago, which I won't watch. So again, basically just like sad English romantic novels are the ones that I won't read. And then, is there a Salman Rushdie film that was made recently? No, it's a few of them.
Are there books that you read that you're like, this should be a movie, whether you're the one to make it or not, that you feel like?
I don't tend to think like that. I mean, I love reading. I read a lot of books.
Yeah.
And I've a lot of books that I love. So I don't tend to think this should be a film, really. No, not really. I kind of just... Actually, no, try the other one, actually, is interesting. So... Wolf Hall, which my wife finds hilarious because my English accent, she finds it. Her mother literally spent 20 minutes trying to work out once what I was saying when I was saying Wolf Hall, Wolf Hall, Wolf Hall, Wolf Hall, Wolf Hall, Wolf Hall. So the Wolf Hall trilogy
Yeah.
They made that on TV in the UK, and I think it won some awards and stuff. But I watched 5 minutes. I was like, no, I don't want to think of Thomas Cromwell like that. I don't want to think of Henry VIII like that. I'm loving these books too much. I know I'm going to reread them at some point. So
yeah, it's funny. You made me think of World War Z. I loved that book, and I have no desire to see the movie because it doesn't like the whole thing. The great part about that book was how it's kind of told after the fact through a series of interviews, and they're like that. There's no interviews in this movie, and I'm like, oh, I don't want to see it.
Yeah, that's it. Again, I think that's the great thing about books. You don't need to see the film.
Do you ever want to try to change? I mean, I kind of asked this before, but is there like a genre that you're looking to move into other than comedy?
I'd love to do a sci-fi. I mean, sci-fi, that's kind of my dream, really. Quite hard to get into, quite hard to get right. But they're the shows that I think I grew up watching. Like Star Trek, obviously Star Wars as a kid. As I say, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. They were
one of my favorites. I love that.
2000 AD was my, I used to get 2000 AD every week for 10 years. I've still got them all. So that kind of sci-fi I found very, that was really my thing growing up was comedy and sci-fi, really.
So 2000 AD, you mean the comic?
The comic, yeah.
Yeah. Did you see the latest Judge Dredd with,
I didn't. Yeah, Kurt, what's his name?
Urban. Carl Urban.
Yeah, Carl Urban. No, I didn't. For the same reason.
It's
I'm watching
really good. Like I was.
Well, people tell me that, but I can't believe it is. But I like the company that made it. I know them quite well. I begged them to, before they made it. Actually, I had lunch with Andrew McDonald, and I was begging him to show me the script, but he didn't do it in the end. But no, what I loved about Judge Dredd was the humour of the world and the idea of this kind of fascist state where people were doing their own little rebellions in any way they could.
Yeah.
I think if you kind of make him the hero, I feel like he might be missing the point of it a bit. He's kind of a fascist.
Yeah. Oh, very much so. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't read comics. I haven't seen it, but it's not. He's not. Judge Dredd's not. He as the years went by, he questioned more and more what was happening, but he didn't fundamentally change it.
Well, he's kind of that. He's kind of that perfect example of a D&D character who's lawful but not necessarily good.
Exactly right. It's exactly that. Yeah. Yeah. It's a very. I mean, again, 2000 AD was so full of ideas that I remember watching or reading. Later sci-fi stuff, or reading. I can't remember what it was. I think maybe it was Ready Player One or something like that, where people were like, "Oh, it's got great twists in it. It's got this in it." And I felt like I'd seen this stuff before, and then I realised I just sort of had soaking up so much written sci-fi from 2000 AD over the years. I was like, they've pretty much done everything you could do with time travel or with all sorts of different futurology and stuff. It really felt like, oh, okay, they've done it. They've done that in 2000 AD somewhere at some point.
And that was it Simon Beasley that drew a lot of that?
2000 AD?
Yeah. I remember that correctly.
No. The ones, my favourite artists were Ron Smith when I was a kid, and then Carlos Ezquerra and Cam Kennedy.
Yeah.
They did a lot of Judge Dredd stuff. And Cam Kennedy, Strontium Dog and stuff like that, Cam Kennedy did a load of, which I'm a huge fan of. And then I got into kind of American comics. I think I was on holiday in America when I bought the first year one Frank Miller Batman year one. That kind of blew my mind. I was like, oh my god, this is so dark and serious. So I'd like to do something like that would be good. Big old. The thing is, I have to say, I love Christopher Nolan films more than anything. Like I've seen the last 3 at the cinema 3 times. I saw Interstellar 3 times in IMAX. I was queuing up in London at 9 a.m. to see it the day it came out. But I didn't love his Batman. I've not seen a Batman film that I would go out on a limb for and say everyone should watch this Batman film.
I think the Nolans were probably the best ones, but yeah. I mean, the only DC movies that I've seen that I love completely was I thought Wonder Woman was great.
Yeah.
And Shazam blew me away.
Yeah, Shazam's great, isn't it?
Yeah, I thought it was just fun. It was exactly, it's kind of exactly what I wanted it to be. I felt like DC's kind of gone too serious with their movies. And
well, there's a friend of mine who said that he works on Marvel films, and he was sort of like, Marvel has the best heroes and DC has the best baddies, which is kind of a problem if you're writing a film, because your heroes are kind of monosyllabic. But I'm not. I mean, I think that's right about Batman. I don't think that's. I mean, I loved the Green Arrow comics when I was a kid as well. I love those ones.
The Longbow Hunter was a great story.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, kind of like, difficult hero, but not as kind of cut and dried as Batman. So that, I don't know.
So is there one hero or villain the thing that really rubs me the wrong way is when they start making movies about villains, like the Venom movie, and I hear Joker's great, but I've no desire to see it. But is there like one character that you're like, I want to write for that character specifically, whether it be a movie or a comic?
Well, my dream, which will never happen. My dream was always I loved Max Normal in Judge Dredd, and he was an informer, one of Judge Dredd's informers, but he dressed like, well, everyone else in Mega City was dressing like these kind of crazy future ways. They have knee pads and elbow pads and all that stuff. He dressed like a City of London businessman from 1950 in a kind of pinstripe suit with a bowler hat on. And I just thought that, and for me, that is the way that I would go into Judge Dredd if I was writing, would be going via the character who's having to live with this kind of fascist state and trying to create their own world out of it. I just love Max Normal. Max Normal was I just thought the cleverest character I'd ever seen when I was a kid. And again, still now, I still think that is how I'd go into making that world of the DC films, would be going via the 2000 AD, would be going via one of the minor characters who's much more sympathetic and has to deal with this kind of existence.
So you think he's more sympathetic because we could relate to him more? Is that?
Well, I just think just because he's living under the fascist regime of Judge Dredd, rather than trying to impose the fascist regime of Judge Dredd.
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying.
It's like, and he's trying to, he was a kind of informer, but he was also breaking the law a little bit in sort of minor ways, and that kind of thing.
I mean, that was kind of the whole thing about that. The Judge Dredd is everyone broke the law.
Yeah.
There was no innocent person.
No, that's it. Yeah. It's a total arbitrary fascist state to the in Mega City 1.
So do you have a kind of an idea of when your new script will be kind of wrapping up, or?
Well, I need to get it done the next couple of weeks, really. So hopefully the next couple of weeks. And then got a couple of other projects I'm working on at the moment, and just trying to, hopefully it'd be nice to be shooting something this year, but I don't know how likely that is.
Oh, yeah. So, I mean, I don't think anything is really in production right now. So is it, I mean, have you heard anything about like when people are going to start shooting movies? And
I've got two friends who are heading back to Vancouver to start shooting quite soon. So I think Vancouver, at least, Canada's picking up. I don't know about the rest of it. I think it feels like everyone's just got bored of it rather than decided that actually it's over. So I guess, I've got a couple of friends heading back to Vancouver next week, actually. So I guess things are up and running.
Are they looking at any unusual new restrictions, plexiglass between the camera and the actors or something bizarre?
No, I think it's kind of like having, it's obviously testing, and then lots of representatives on set, the COVID rep to check that everyone's following the rules, and then lots of those people. So somebody on set, somebody at base, somebody between base and set, somebody so just people checking that everyone's following the rules really as well. So it's kind of I think it's going to increase costs, which is never great for a certain level of film. or TV.
Yeah. Do you intend to go back to TV at some point, or are you kind of happy that you've moved on to films?
No, I think I am. I think I'm back in TV now for a while. I did just did a sitcom in the UK, and I'm working on a couple of TV projects over here at the moment, just sort of pilot script stage. So yeah, at the moment, my to-do list is all television. But again, I kind of fell into film in a way because the first Inbetweeners film was a story that we wanted to tell that was too expensive to tell on the TV. Mm-hmm. So and it was at a time when nobody was making films of TV comedies. And then that went so well in the UK, it kind of changed the market. And suddenly every TV comedy was making a film after that. Because
I was just going to ask you that if that was a normal thing over there, because I know I'd watched
Partridge, maybe, or
I can't remember the name of the show. It starred Jack Whitehall, and he played a school teacher.
Yeah, Bad Education. Yeah, exactly that.
Yeah.
Basically, none of that would have happened without our film, because at the time our film came out in the 70s, they always terrible British comedies. When some of them quite good, but most of them quite bad.
Yeah,
all had a feature film made, and then it became such a naff thing to do that everyone stopped doing it. So when we were going to do our Inbetweeners film in 2011, there were articles saying, worst idea ever, why would they do this, what's wrong with them, it's so naff, it's going to be a disaster. And then it went well and people liked it, and that changed everything. Suddenly,
and then they're immediately like, I knew this was going to be good the whole time.
God, even today the articles written about going, obviously that was a success, it was so obvious it was going to be a hit, so obvious, the obvious thing to do was to take it to film. So yeah, and again, I'm glad it opened the way for films like Bad Education and the Partridge film and stuff like that. We just made, because there was an audience. People did want to go and laugh in a cinema with 300 other people. But yes, we did that. Then we did a sequel, and then after doing the sequel, we had a kind of mini film deal for a while that fell apart. But I made another film then, and so yeah, it was kind of just fell into it really. I like working with people I like, and I like trying to tell funny stories that I think are good. So I'm happy to work in any happy for the work. Frankly, I will work. Just happy to be working really. Don't mind whether it's TV or film. When the sitcom we just made, there were times where I was thinking, "Oh God, have we got any more stories? If we have to do this again, have we run out of stories?" Whereas a feature film, you don't really think that. You just think that's done. But yeah, no, I'm kind of been pretty lucky the past few years.
But it seems like, especially here in the U.S., that if there's a successful feature film, that they want a sequel, whether it's nonsensical or it makes sense or not. I mean,
yeah.
Is that something that you ever kind of think about, being like, oh, do I want to do a sequel if the studio wants it and there's not a story to tell?
The only time it's ever happened was when we did The Inbetweeners. We were absolutely adamant we weren't going to do any more. This is it. And then the truth was that everyone liked that film so much. Everybody I met, from family members to taxi drivers, would say, "Are you not doing another one then?" And you'd be like, "No, probably not." And they'd be like, "Why not?" And you think, well, because we said we weren't, isn't a really good enough reason.
Yeah.
Not really. And people, there's a real appetite for it. People really wanted another one. And so we sort of thought, oh God, all right, then let's make another one. So we made another one. We really enjoyed it. And then it wasn't I think we could have made a third film, but it didn't feel like people were rabidly desperate for a third film. So we just didn't bother. But no, I think it's a nice problem to have. Having made other films and other things, having people say to you, we want more and we'll pay you to do more of them, and people in the street saying to you, can you please do some more, is an absolutely lovely problem to have, and quite a rare one, I should point out. So it's not, I would just love to be making the 10th version of a film right now. Be like, yeah, great.
Was there more pressure going into the second one because you felt you had to kind of improve on or kind of compete with that first one?
Yeah. No, it was huge. Absolutely huge. It was huge. Huge amount of pressure, really. And the same, in a way, the sitcom we've just done, which is a huge amount of pressure because people are expecting the same thing and it's never going to be the same thing. But we did make... Yes, I mean, it's just one of those things. It's like, it's an enormous amount of pressure. it's very, very hard to live up to something that means so much to so many people in the UK. And also, not just in a kind of like they like the jokes, but it reminds them of a time of their life. It reminds them of a group of friends. It becomes a thing that you don't, like all art, really.
Yeah.
Art. As soon as it goes out there, it's not yours anymore. It's people's interpretation of it. It's what's important. And so it was an incredible amount of pressure, but also kind of irrelevant because we were doing what we could do, not do anything ever again, or I still feel like that now. I'm like, well, it's worth trying, isn't it? Even if you don't like it, if I'm still getting a chance to try to do things, I might not be as good at it. You might not like it as much. I'm certainly putting as much work in as I did, but I don't know what the other option is. Just stopping and resting on your laurels and saying, well, that thing I made you love, and so I'm never going to do anything else again.
Yeah. I know that like some British shows have been brought over here and kind of revamped and obviously The Office is probably the most famous one. Has there ever been like a Inbetweeners possibility of coming to the US?
Yeah, there was a series of the Inbetweeners on MTV, which even now in the UK is considered a kind of low point artistically. There's a lot of reasons for that. It's not the act. The actors were fantastic, I think, and the crew and everyone that was there was great. It was kind of like, for me, it was one of the worst experiences of my entire life, but it's still, and in fact, it still hangs around in the UK. Blows my mind that people still reference it all the time. It was such a failure, and I don't think that was entirely fair. But it happened. It was a disaster.
I'd never even heard of it. That's funny.
Well, it wasn't even a disaster. It was it's a long story, which unfortunately I can't go into now because it involves some people who are still alive. But
yeah.
I know why it happened. I was in the middle of it at times. I could see it happening around me. And I could see decisions being made that I disagreed with, and I was trying to tell people, and people didn't want to know. And I'm far from perfect, but I could see that the show that we'd made was changing into something that wasn't that. And I understand there has to be a certain translation across the Atlantic, but I felt that the ways it was being translated weren't the ways that were going to work. I think they were missing the point of what we tried to do.
So being the writer and creator, did you have to kind of like sign over certain rights or creativity that you kind of had to?
Yeah, it's funny.
I'm not trying to ask, if it's a sore subject.
No. Honestly, we were so naive. I don't even know is the truth. All I know is that sometimes we'd say things and then we'd get an email or a phone call from like someone's agent saying, if you give another no, you're going to get sacked. And we're like, I thought we ran. What's happening? It's kind of, I think you said TV show episodes. I couldn't watch episodes because I didn't know where the jokes were. I was like, I don't know why this is funny because this is just what happened. Like this is like someone making a documentary about my life. Like I can't see where the jokes are in this show. This is just what happened. So it's kind of, it was like you sort of, I think you're kind of green and you're British, you're naive and you're happy you've made a show that everyone likes and the Americans are giving you money for it and they like you and everyone's being nice to you. And so you just sort of going all wide-eyed. And then before you know it,
they're going to fire you from your own show.
Yeah, and you're getting like, you're getting kind of like, the day it went out, the day that the Inbetweeners went out in the UK, and again, the actors were great. I really liked the performers in it. And actually, and the scripts weren't bad, but there was something missing. And I just got the most amount of abuse I've ever had in my entire life on Twitter, like relentless abuse all day. And I was quite surprised. I was like, I don't understand why people are so angry. Like, I don't get it. Like, we haven't deleted the tapes of the original one. We haven't, but it was something like, it was this idea that we kind of sold out, that we'd done something inexcusable by diluting the beauty of this perfect thing, but we never saw it as a perfect thing. We didn't see it as a thing of beauty. We saw it as a sitcom. Then somebody else said, "Do you want to make an American version?" We're like, "Oh, that worked for The Office. We'll do that. We'll try that." And then the next thing I know, volleys of abuse. But
Well,
then I suppose
it's funny. I wonder if it's part of that. You know, you said earlier where once you create something, it doesn't really belong to you. I wonder if it's the fact that, you know, as fans, I see this a lot where fans feel that the property somehow belongs to them, and if it doesn't fit their exact expectations, that, you know, you have somehow failed them personally.
Yeah, it was that. And I think also, I've always found that people are much more vitriolic about comedy than they are about anything else, because I think a sense of humor is so...
Really? Have you seen Star Wars?
Yeah, okay. Well, maybe especially Star Wars. But I think just in general, like a drama might go out. And it might be all right. It might be great. You know, TV drama might be quite good. Might be all right. You don't get people going, this is the worst thing I've ever seen. This is the worst drama. This is terrible. Whereas I think comedy, because people take a sense of humour seriously, and they take it very personal. So it's like, you know, when you see a dating ad, it's always like good sense of humour, great sense of humour. I've got a great sort of dry sense of humour. Like a sense of humour, nobody thinks they haven't got a good sense of humour. Everybody thinks they've got a good sense of humour. So when you make something that's supposed to be funny and they don't like it, I think it becomes quite personal. Like it becomes like you're almost, they feel like you're attacking them.
Yeah.
And so the video, but you're right. I think Star Wars might be the exception that proves the rule of people going just crazy. I mean, I saw the first one of the new ones.
Oh, they're fine.
I liked it. I watched. It's better than I watched the first one, as I call it, A New Hope. Yeah. My son the other day for the first time, and I hadn't seen it. I watched it. You know, I had all the toys. I still got all the toys actually I had as a kid. I was obsessed with it as a kid. Well, I hadn't seen it since they put in the scene with Jabba the Hutt and stuff like that.
Oh, those are not good.
Yeah, bad choices here. Wow.
Yeah. I don't know what the rationale for that was. It was not good. I think I was gonna rank Star Wars movies as my favorites.
Yeah.
Probably start with Empire and then go to Rogue One. I thought Rogue One was amazing.
I'll have to go and watch that then. I think, it's really good, Star Wars. It's like the first one. And Empire Strikes Back is really... I can watch that again recently. That's really good as well. So, yeah, I'll try Rogue One then at some point.
Rogue One, and it seems like a new trend in Star Wars is like they're trying to make Star Wars and into other genres.
Yeah.
So like the Rogue One is very much like a World War II movie is what it felt like to me. And then Mandalorian's a spaghetti western. I mean, it's just damn good. But I want to say thanks, man. This was a lot of fun. I appreciate taking the time. And normally I ask, now where people can go and find your work online, but I mean, they can just IMDb you and
Netflix. The Inbetweeners is on Netflix if you want to watch that. 10 years old. But, it gets better. Inbetweeners is on Netflix. The Festival, the film I directed, is on Amazon Prime. And I guess Flight of Conchords. It's about a music festival, about some young people going to a music festival.
Oh, nice. I'll have to check that out.
And, just a comedy. Yeah. And then, I guess, also, actually, I think Peep Show, which I was a script editor on, which I'm tangentially involved in, that was on Netflix as well. But that's the stuff.
Nice, man. Like I said, thanks for taking the time to talk to us, and hopefully you get back to filming soon.
Yeah, I hope so too. And hopefully one day I'll be in Massachusetts as well. I'm a big fan of the North.
Have you been here before?
I've been to Boston.
Yeah,
but not. Yeah, in Boston. I've been to see the Red Sox. I'm quite a baseball fan secretly, so I went to go to Fenway Park.
I have lived in this area my whole life. I've been to Fenway Park once.
Yeah,
and it was kind of I told someone I'd never been. They insisted I go, and it was. I couldn't tell you who was playing, who won. I had many, many, many too many beers. And
that's what I like about baseball. It's a bit like a sort of short version of cricket, which is just like sitting in the sunshine, drinking lots of beer. That's kind of my dream. Really.
Yeah. Well, if that's your dream, you should definitely check out Plymouth. It's I mean, we have 4 breweries here in town, and it's not that big of a town.
Wow, great.
So, but thanks again, and
My pleasure.
thanks
Thanks
to our listeners.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. You can find us on all social medias at Inebri-art, except for Instagram, we're at Inebri-art6. You can email us with your questions, complaints, and whatnot at Inebri-art@yahoo.com. And if you're looking for more podcasts, you can check out the other podcasts on our network, Retro Redoctopus, America's Hometown Horror, and, of course, Bar Talk, Old Colony, and Inebri-art Podcast, the original. So check those out and subscribe and comment so we can reach more people. And thanks for listening.